At Five Star Bank, community is at the heart of what we do. Every day we strive to have thoughtful solutions for our customers and help our communities prosper. Honest dialogue about the issues affecting the region is vitally important to that prosperity. We are proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
Some believe that without changes in programming and leadership that reflects the evolving demographics and the interests of today's audiences, traditional arts organizations may not survive. Others maintain that culture is timeless and shouldn't be sacrificed at the altar of what's popular at the moment. What is the reality of this debate, and why should it matter to us? Joining us today in partnership with the American Leadership Forum, our longtime arts patron and former supervisor Sandy Smoley, Metropolitan Arts Commission member Cyril Shaw, and local restaurateur Clay Nutting. Clay, you have a restaurant, you used to be in marketing. Why are you so interested in this issue?
For me, I guess it was just something that's always been innate. I have a deep appreciation for people who are creative. I formed a nonprofit in college with my college roommate that supported music and art education. I carried that as I moved to California from Boston in 2004 and started putting on shows and raising money for music and art education programs.
What type of shows?
You know, a lot of it was fairly small, independent, indie types of shows. I mean, we run the gamut on the genres that we work with, but you know, coffee shops and art lofts and, you know, small places. And I've just have a, you know, a strong appreciation for especially the kind of independent arts community, the people who are kind of makers and, you know, kind of doing things out of passion. So that's really where my appreciation for art began and kind of carries on today.
Cyril, is that where the action's at, in this small bubbling up of sort of individual creativity, people creating their own art?
Sometimes, yes, and that can be very exciting and very attractive if it's grassroots, no matter what the issue is. If it feels like your peers have created it or your peers have turned you onto it, then it can be much more powerful attraction. And the grassroots organizations that we have in Sacramento, many tend to be cultural grassroots arts organizations. They create a fabric of arts and community here that is very important to the arts institutions, in addition to our larger, more traditional institutions.
And Sandy, that raises for me the question is that there's a lot bubbling up from what we're hearing within the community. How does that connect up to the institutions that tend to be the ones we look to for arts leadership?
Well, I think it's a combination of both, and I think it has to do with programming. I think that you can program both entities, and people appreciate that. We had a concert the other night that was just fantastic.
Where at?
It was at the community center, and it was for the Philharmonic Opera, and the artist was just outstanding and exciting, and it was very different than the traditional other pieces that were played that night. And that's what people were talking about when they left the hall. They were saying, oh my gosh, how interesting and how culturally diverse.
And you're a former elected official, and you have been a supporter of the arts for decades. Why are the arts important to this community?
Well, they're important not only economically, because they bring back a lot of and contribute to the economy. And I think they also, we're trying to take the place of arts in the school and music in the school that has been stopped. And so I think it's important because if we didn't have that, these young people would never be exposed to traditional music.
As a former elected official, I just have to ask you the question, have our elected leaders at the state level really failed us with regards to funding the arts and making it an important part of K through 12 education?
I think that they don't really care about the arts that much. And
Really?
I think they see that as a local issue, that we should be funding it locally. and that they should not use state monies to do that. Now, the Arts Commission at the state has been woefully cut, and they can't, their hands are tied, they can't do much of anything anymore. But locally, you know, that's who's picking up the slack and trying to keep these arts organizations going.
Cyril, give us kind of a measuring stick. In K through 12 education, generally in the districts right now, when I grew up, I learned violin, bass, we went to music appreciation type activities, went and saw the symphony and things like that. What happens today for kids that are going from kindergarten up to 12th grade?
That's a great question. And like you know, growing up and going to Sacramento public schools, we had exposure to all of that. We had object art and the opportunity to perform plays and just unbelievable exposure to the arts. My kids now, my daughter's in kindergarten, and they do have a full-time arts teacher, but that's paid for completely by the parents.
Really?
Yes, it's the only way to fund arts in school. It's the only way to fund music in public schools today.
So if you're in a low-income neighborhood, you're just completely out.
Yeah, it's very difficult. There are programs that the Arts Commission has that what we do is we target the schools and districts that are most underserved when it comes to exposure to the arts, and try to put arts teachers, very professional, well-educated arts teachers, into their schools so they can get that same exposure, because it's so important. It's so important to kids, not just for their appreciation of the arts, but for getting a more well-rounded education in general.
And school bands are a thing of the past, and it's almost un-American to not play in a school band. That was such a big part of my life, and I loved every minute of it. The marching band, playing multiple musical instruments. You don't have that today, and it's very sad.
And where do the musicians come to perform at establishments like yours in the future? There has always been sort of a succession of people that were coming up. In the local scene, are you seeing any sort of demand, especially among the millennials and the younger generations, for arts programming, maybe in a different form?
Well, I think anytime you have a musician or an artist, they had at some point been introduced to it by either where they went to school or someone in their family, and so I definitely think that speaks to engagement, you know, in that we have a generation of people who may have grown up without music education, and it's not that they're less likely to appreciate music or to play music, but certainly a lot of artists, you know, had some exposure to it at some point in their life that inspired them to continue to create. But I mean, I think that speaks, you know, strongly towards, you know, why we're seeing a lot of, you know, audiences dwindle in certain, you know, art institutions, and I think it's because people aren't getting exposed to music and art at a young age, and learning why they should appreciate it or what's interesting about it.
You have a background in marketing. If you could wave your magic wand and get the arts community to do one thing to improve their visibility, to draw in more patrons, or to expand the base from a demographic standpoint, what recommendation would you give them?
Well, I think it's refreshing to hear and to see some arts institutions being a little more progressive than maybe they had been in the past. I think, and again, I'm just speculating, I don't know for sure, but you know, I think several years ago, maybe a decade ago, things were happening to these institutions, and maybe they were talking about it internally, but a lot of the things that they're doing now seem to speak to, okay, the tide's changed, we need to figure out how to engage people, we need to do things a little differently than we've done before. I think our traditional methods are important, but we got to get out there in an untraditional way to get attention and to introduce people to art, whether it's the ballet doing things in their studio with pairing with Roostaller, or Beethoven and Brats that the Philharmonic is doing, and I think doing things in a way that kind of is a little more avant-garde for the traditional art institutions is important, and I think it's, again, refreshing to hear them thinking that way progressively and figuring out a way to get attention.
Now, Sandy, I don't know if this is a local phenomenon or not, but I have heard a great deal about corporations not really willing in this region to step up and support the arts community. Not that there's no support whatsoever, but that almost that it's becoming politically incorrect to support mainline traditional institutions because of the fact that they're seen as elitist or highbrow or insular, and that unless you wrap something around what are considered to be more politically correct populations at the moment, it's very hard to get funding. Is there any truth to that?
There's a lot of truth to that, and when you work with corporations, they say we want to give to education, we want to give to technology, we want to give to kids. And so unless you can make your Philharmonic and opera relevant to those institutions, the money isn't there. And the big money is no longer there. We're dealing with $10,000 rather than $50,000. And it used to be, when corporations were in town, that all of their chief executives said, you will give to the arts, and they did. And now that is not the case anymore. The whole thing is changing as far as the direction that they have for their money.
Now, is that true across the country, or is it really a symptom that's confined to this region?
It's really a symptom of Sacramento.
Really?
Sacramento's tough. Across the country, you see traditional corporations giving to the arts. Like I talk about Toledo, Ohio. They have a $12 million endowment for their symphony.
Toledo?
Toledo, and that's smaller than Sacramento. But they have Fortune 500 companies that are really involved in the arts, and they really push the arts.
And what would you say to those chief executives of those corporations if they were here with us today in terms of why it's in their own enlightened self-interest to participate more strongly in the arts?
Well, you need to do both. You know, give to education, give to technology, but give also to the arts because of what it brings back to our economy and what it does for youth and the exposure that has, and it's very important.
Cyril, I know that you at SMAC must talk about this issue. Do you have anything you can share with us?
Absolutely. No, and Sandy raises a great point. And there's real data now from studies that have been done that show that a rich arts community not only makes the community a better place for a lot of the reasons that we've been talking about and most people assume, but that the arts can be a real economic engine for a city, for a region, that it can attract not just the performances, but creative workers, it can create industry, all these things around it, and the multiplier effect is tremendous.
It's real.
Yeah.
There's a lot of conversations happening right now at like the Metro Chamber and other business organizations that have been leading kind of the charge about why people live and choose to live and work in an area, and a lot of it has to do with their cultural assets. And I think if I'm a corporation looking to move to a region, that a place that will attract and keep our working core because of the cultural assets, and then they have an opportunity to attract and retain the creative talent, I think that would be an important aspect of why you wanted to be here.
Well, this creative class issue, Sacramento actually has a reputation as being a city that has a pretty good creative class. I mean, obviously, we can always grow beyond that.
Right.
But the issue of supporting the arts, whether at the grassroots level or at the more larger institution level, there are plenty of arguments for that. I mean, the one that's top of mind is in Walter Isaacson's book on Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs talks about his auditing calligraphy classes and things that were more artistic in nature is what led to his design sensibility for all of the Apple products. And so I do wonder, Sandy, why is it so hard to make the sale?
I just can't answer that, but it is very identifiable. It has happened over the last 5 years, and they just announce what their priorities are, and if you don't fit into that priority, then you're not going to get corporate money.
Right.
And it has to happen from the top down, from the corporate level, being large patrons and benefactors, but it also has to happen from the bottom up. And I know at the Arts Commission that just last year we spent more than $350,000 giving small cultural arts awards grants to over 550 organizations.
Wow.
And these are organizations that often are communities that are underrepresented in mainstream arts, and where these small grants are what allow them to sustain themselves throughout the year. So it has to be top down, but there also has to be grassroots support, financial and otherwise, so that we can adapt to the new types of art and art forms that people will appreciate for years.
Well, let's go a little bit further on that. One very successful experiment that's happened in the last 12 months was the Sacramento Regional Foundation did their Day of Giving, and where people went, small donations online, kind of like a crowdsourcing approach, and it was wildly successful. Randy Sater, who is the CEO within this region, talks about a changing definition of philanthropy, and that philanthropy today, which is always looked at historically in big chunks, some of our election processes have proven that you can raise a significant amount of money in small chunks from individual folks, but you have to find a way to reach them. Is anyone in the arts community using those technology crowdsourcing approaches to how we involve people, not only in the fundraising and philanthropic side, but the participation side of arts?
Well, I'll say just one example is that, and this is funny, literally a funny example, is in the comedic arts, is that comedians typically used to go to clubs and then go to mainstream television. Now, this happens in music as well, now instead their next big performance, I'm talking about big artists, they'll release them online and you'll pay $10 to watch it online.
I think Beyonce just did that.
Yeah,
didn't she?
with her whole album, exactly. And those types of things. That's crowdsourcing with huge artists, different mediums, but that's one way. Now, mind you, they're selling their performances, but you can do the same thing to sell people on the idea of supporting arts institutions.
And in creating or driving down that access to the youngest among us, where some families, especially with evolving demographics, don't have the tradition of going to museums, of patronage, of philanthropic support, how can we better involve people to start to create that path to being a contributing member and a participant in experiencing arts within our region?
Well, I mean, I think it starts with leadership, and that's each one of us who knows why the arts, and culture of our community is important, to grab a neighbor and grab a friend and go out to a show and take them to the ballet, or go to, Bows and Arrows, which unfortunately is closing soon. But, again, these are just examples of things that are happening all around us all the time. Every Monday there's a great jazz program at Luna's, a small 30-seat cafe. Every Tuesday we do something at Lowbrow for free, where we have touring electronic, arts musicians come through. And so it's really just kind of maybe getting motivated and making sure that if you are an appreciator of the arts and music and things that are happening in our community, don't just go to a show by yourself. If you have to pay for someone to come, do it, and just maybe.
What's the coolest thing you've seen in the past 12 months that you say, man, we really need to see more of that?
Well,
it can even be one of your own.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I hate to pat myself on the back, but no, it's really a team, kind of thing that brings a lot of these things to the community. We, on 20th Street in front of Lowbrow on second Saturdays, we did a music festival called This. It was completely free. We were bringing artists out that, have played Coachella and Outside Lands and Treasure Island, and presenting them for absolutely free, because it's important to be a tastemaker. It's important to introduce people to the things that maybe they don't know are cool yet, but should, and because they're kind of trending in other big cities around the country. I want people to experience that here and create an appetite to see more of those types of things. And so we brought out some bands like Yacht and Classics, and these are artists, again, that are playing these big festivals around the country, and we gave it to people for free. And I thought that that was, you know, a thing that I want to see more of, and we're finding ways to do that more frequently. But again, you know, that's I think just a small example of things that are actually happening quite a bit here in Sacramento.
Sandy, what's been your favorite thing that you've seen in the past 12 months, either an initiative or a production you said, wow, we need to do more of that because that is moving in the right direction to involve people more?
Well, I think Music Circus and Best of Broadway, I'm really thrilled with those. I get really emotional over opera. That really provides a marvelous experience. That is the most expensive art form, but it also gives you a sense of joy that nothing else does.
Does that mean that it's the least experienced too, since it's the most expensive? Because there is a relationship between income and accessibility.
And accessibility. You know, it's just very difficult to do a production like an opera. It's $450,000 to put it on because of the costumes, the sets, all of that. That's very expensive, and ticket sales are at like 30%. And so it's you have to raise the difference.
How do you connect a young person, say from an immigrant community, to opera? You know, if they got in the room, their entire life might be changed because of that one experience. But particularly among immigrant communities and low-income disadvantaged communities, their experience in art, however it is experienced, tends to come more from something that speaks immediately to their community. How do you build the bridge, Cyril?
Well, I think that, you know, interestingly, all of these traditional arts organizations that we're talking about, and talking about how we want to increase the diversity of the audience, historically they've been very international. You know, you think about the ballet linking the U.S. and the former Soviet Union, the symphony linking the U.S. and communist China, artists working together, don't even speak the same language, working collaboratively from all over the world because of their medium, that shared passion for art. And so I think a lot of it is just that, just introduction. If we're talking about communities where the cost of attending these performances is an issue, then let's create opportunities for those communities, for those folks to attend and appreciate the arts for free or for a discounted price or whatever it takes, just to get them get some exposure. And at the same time, I think that coupled with, on the grassroots side, supporting the arts organizations that come out of those immigrant communities organically, I think the two of those things together can be very powerful for Sacramento.
Incidentally, what performance or initiative in the past year did you participate in or were aware of that you really thought was a good model for the area?
Well, I already mentioned the Cultural Arts Awards program, which I'm proud of, but this is one that's not necessarily a performance, but I had the opportunity to tour, they're under construction right now, some live-work lofts specifically for artists. So it's affordable.
Really?
Yeah, it's affordable housing specifically geared towards artists, and that's a very broad definition. It could be a chef from lowbrow. It could be a street performer of some kind. It could be any medium. It's a very broad definition. But by giving this creative class, as we talked about, an affordable place to live, putting them in the same place where they can collaborate and appreciate one another, I think that could be big for Sacramento.
Sandy, you've served on a number of different arts organization boards, and they tend to be very prestigious positions. And when you serve on those boards, they come with a lot of responsibility, not only for participation, but a lot of times for fundraising. How do major institutions diversify that board and get those right thoughts and people around the table who may hold the key to the future audience, but they're not really in a place right now where they can step up the way that more traditional type of board members are expected to?
Well, I think some of your leadership programs, I'll tell you, I'm impressed with those that come out of Nehemiah. That leadership program to me is fantastic. And we've gotten a couple of wonderful board members from that venue.
Okay, because it would seem to me that you've really got to build, also within the governance structures, you've got to have more information coming in because it's one thing to care about a subject, it's another one to have someone who's directly involved in the subject. And so are you participating or aware that there's greater participation from people from the younger generations in those leadership discussions?
You know, I think that you'll see things with the younger generation kind of unfold in, you know, now that I'm in my 30s, I'm serving on boards and doing things of that nature. But when I was maybe in my 20s, I might not have done that, where I would just kind of allow creativity kind of unfold.
And we're going to have to leave it there.
Oh.
And that's our show. Thanks to our guests and thanks to you for watching. For Studio Sacramento, I'm Scott Syfax. See you next time right here on KVIE.
At Five Star Bank, community is at the heart of what we do. Every day we strive to have thoughtful solutions for our customers and help our communities prosper. Honest dialogue about the issues affecting the region is vitally important to that prosperity. We are proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
All episodes of Studio Sacramento, along with other KVIE programs, are available to watch online at kvie.org/video.